Hello all, good morning. This is Niladri Mahapatra once again from Agile Digest. Today we'll talk about Scrum and Kanban board, and also we'll be covering some areas of the backlogs, the product backlog, sprint backlog. Then we'll talk about how we can start a sprint, and after that we'll configure our Scrum board and Kanban board. So before we proceed, let's try to understand a very high level on product backlog and sprint backlog, what exactly we talk about product backlog. So these are the topics that we'll be covering. I am just proceeding in the next slide where we'll be talk about a product backlog. So if you are able to see this diagram, in this diagram we have list of all user requirements, user stories, technical spikes, enablers, whatever you can say, whatever you have in your work items, everything is get logged into one area that's called product backlog. And from that product backlog we take a selective numbers of stories or technical spikes based on the team's capacity and move into a sprint, and that's happens sprint over sprint. So this is your product backlog if you are able to see this diagram, and from there we are actually picking few stories from our user stories list. We do a sprint planning, make our sprint backlog. After the sprint planning, we will execute our sprint over here, and then once we close the sprint at the time box of 15 days or whatever your sprint duration is, the completed stories goes back to your release pipeline, or that's mapped into somewhere in DevOps pipeline, whatever the pipeline you have, that's we treat as completed and ready to go. The incompleted stories goes back to backlog, or product owner can decide whether that needs to go to the next sprint or it will be stay in the backlog. Once the sprint is closed, again we do another sprint planning for the next sprint and pick some stories from the product backlog. So product backlog is the area where you have all the open requirements or that work the user stories needs to be worked on. The product backlog can have many different kind of work items. So if I am talking about Jira by default have three different kinds or three different of types that can be going to your product backlog if you are working on a Scrum project. Number one, user story, task and bugs. That's by default in Jira. We'll talk about that, how we can make them in product backlog. Similarly, when you are actually working on your sprint, your product backlog is an emergent backlog where your new ideas or defects, everything comes into your product backlog. That's a very high level of product backlog. If you want to know more about product backlog, there is a free YouTube video I have in my Agile Digest channel talking about the artifacts, where you can actually look into what are the different backlog we can have or different items we can have in our backlog. Okay, let's talk about little more about a product backlog, how it's actually comes in. So product owner has a visions of product, and the product owner understand the value of each and every functionality to be developed. He or she creates all those expected functionality as requirement in form of user story and make a list of all those user story at one place in right order of execution. So that's what we call prioritization. That list is product backlog, and the arrangement those user story in right order is prioritization. So let's try to understand this in a pictorial explanations. We have our product owner, they have some ideas, they are getting some new requirement from stakeholders as well, and moving that item into one stack, one list. That's our product backlog. And our product backlog can have user story, technical spike, bugs or defects, epics, features, etc. So many things can go into a product backlog. In Jira, we can have by default Jira. I am not talking about any customization. We can have user story. Technical spikes is a customized options in Jira. You can customize to make another type. Bugs or defects, that definitely there in Jira, and your task is not mentioned here, but you can create task as another item. Many people use task as a technical spikes for Jira, and all of these items goes inside your product backlog, right? This is your product backlog. We'll soon see, look into Jira how this product backlog that I am explaining here is come up in our Jira. So now we'll talk about a sprint and sprint backlog. We already talked about a product backlog. Now we'll talk about what exactly sprints and what is the sprint backlog. So every iteration or sprints that you might have heard about, that we start with the planning and end with a sprint closure. In between we do review, development, testing, design, many activities we do. So all these items we don't do on the entire list of backlog items. We select few of the top priority story based on our capacity or the team's capacity and put them in one item. So if I have a backlog, these are the feature list, the product owner, the project teams or the engineering team or the development team, whatever you say is, they combinedly move, they create the product backlog and the team do a sprint planning and make a sprint backlog with few items. So if I talk about the sprint backlog, that's another artifacts. Also we have three artifacts in Agile: sprint backlog, product backlog and the increment. We'll talk about increment little later or some on other video, but let's try to understand the sprint backlog. We'll soon demonstrate this in Jira to find out what exactly we are learning over here, how that is actually affecting or how that is actually happen in Jira itself. So sprint backlog is a subset of product backlog items selected for a specific item. So it's not a separate items. It's, you don't copy product backlog item to sprint backlog, you just move them to a sprint. Now at the beginning of a sprint, the Scrum team selects sets of product backlog items which meets the definitions of ready and in top priority. I am not talking about definition of ready here, but I assume that you understand what is definition of ready, keeping in mind the capacity of the Scrum team. The sprint backlog lasts for the duration of the sprint. So if you have a 2-week sprint, the sprint backlog lasts for 2 weeks. If you have a 3-week sprint, the sprint backlog lasts for 3 weeks. So it forms on the first day of the sprint. The sprint backlog forms on the first day of the sprint and dissolve at the last day of the sprint. So when you have started with, let's assume 5 user stories on your sprint backlog, 3 you have completed. So the completed product backlog items goes back to product. The completed product backlog item goes back to product backlog with closed state, and the incomplete product backlog goes back to product backlog as open state. Now in Jira, it don't shows the product backlog items, those are closed, but you can still, there is an option where you can see where are the closed items. But practically the sprint is an area where we mark the stories temporarily for a sprint scope. When it is completed or not completed, it all goes back to product backlog item. In Jira, the closed product backlog items are not visible in the list, but those are still part of one backlog where you can actually find out these are the closed item, these are the open item. Now if I talk about sprint backlog items, it can have the same amount of work or same type of work, user stories, technical spike, bugs or defects, all of them are part of sprint backlog, but additionally you can have subtask or sprint defects. In Jira, sprint defects does not exist. In Rally, they call it as bugs or defects that you can see under part of each story, but each product backlog items can have subtask by default in Jira. We can customize to make another subchild type of any of these sprint backlog items for the purpose of capturing the sprint defects. Now let's try to understand sprint backlog item flow. This is an example where a story or work items can move from new to committed to dev in progress to test in progress. Then you can do a review and done. This is a flow. Continuously when you are working on sprint, your user stories are changing their states at different time based on what exactly the team is working on that particular story. We'll have that clarity or have that understanding more clear when we'll be going through end of this particular tutorial, where we'll be configuring our Scrum board with all these status and columns. And then we have a sprint backlog item for the subtask. That's another example. So instead of having all these different small activities in between, a simplified way of having your sprint backlog is just having new. in progress and done. So, in progress means it can be dev in progress or test in progress or review in progress. So, it's all depends on your organization standard, your organization structures, how you have splitted your workflow, how you want to visualize your progress in your board. Now, let us try to look into this product backlog and sprint backlog in Jira. So, this is one product backlog, or this is one project I have. This is the project name. You can have your project name, and I have a sprint that is something. So, let us remove the sprint for now, so that we can get a better understanding. I do not have any sprint as of now. I have only the product backlog items, and there are numbers of user stories I have in backlog. In this backlog, I have the user stories name, I have the epic name, because one epic can have multiple stories. I have the user stories ID, and I have the priority, or if it is flagged, and the story point. The story point is coming because we have configured something as our default estimation statistics that will be learning during the end of the sessions when we will be talking about our Scrum board configuration. Now, if you want to create a new item in your backlog, in your product backlog, there is one way. You can click create issues, and when you are creating the issues, it's showing a drop down at the left hand side over here. That left hand side is takes task, bug and story. That are the three items you can create in your backlog if it is your Scrum project, because in your Scrum project you cannot create epic as a backlog item. But I will tell you how you can create that epic. The technical spike is a custom field that I had created, so that I can create some technical spike, but that is not the default issue types. For you, you will be having this task, bug and story as default. So, what I will be doing, I am just saying testing of user story creation for Agile Digest training. This is just I am giving a rough idea. So, this is what I have created. You can see this this is a task I have created. Now, this task what I have created is, it's a type of a task. You can see this icon is a task. You can create a similar kind of, you can actually identify the task is blue, the bug is red and the story is green. And by that way you can actually identify, once you will be started working on Jira extensively, you can identify by this icon, okay, this is a user story or what. Now, within that user story, what I will be doing is, I will be creating one more, and I will be creating a story, and I am saying, okay, testing of creation of user story. So, now I can see I have created two user stories. Now, within a backlog items, there are multiple functionalities. We will be looking into them in a while. So, one of them, what we can do is, I just want to prioritize them by moving into a different space. So, I know that this particular icon is a priority, and in our previous video we already talked about the issue detail view. The right side, this box is the issue detail view, where I can actually change the priority of the selected story by simply selecting the high over here. Once I have selected it, you will see this icon has changed. Now, it is high. But apart from that, what I want is this stories, I want to move it to top of my backlog. So, I will be drag and drop it to my backlog, but it is actually very hard for moving it to top if I have multiple user stories in my backlog. So, are you able to see that how much time I am spending just to dragging and dropping into top of the backlog. So, there is another way of doing it. So, let me just drop it at the top, and then we will see this one is TC311. The next I will be doing the same thing TC312 by just right click on that item and top of backlog, send to top of backlog. So, if I do that, you can simply see that 312 is actually in top of my backlog. Now, what I want to do is I just need to move few of the stories within a closed space to here and there. I can simply do drag and drop. Now also I can do a movement of stories at the top of the backlog based on my priority change. I can select this one. I can select by using my control key. I am pressing my control key, so I can select multiple stories from different space. I have selected these many stories and those are all different space. Then I can right click on any of them and top of backlog. So those all stories will come to top of my backlog. That's way you can actually change the ranking of your product backlog item. There is another way from where you can create your user stories. Okay, there is another space from where we can create our user story, that's by clicking on this plus sign. So if I click on this plus sign, it will come with an pop-up and shows few of the informations. I can see the project that is coming up here, and by default it shows the project that is selected, and I can select any other projects for which I want to create, but I am just leaving it right here. Now I will be selecting the task issue type, whether it is a task, story, technical, spike or epic. Here you can create an epic, but even I create a epic, it will not go to my backlog. We'll show that why. Now I will be giving a summary. So test story creating from plus sign. This is just I am adding, but when you will be writing your user story, don't create user story with this kind of text. You need to write it like as a user I want, so that kind of entry you need to do. So the descriptions, you give all the details of descriptions, acceptance criteria also you can add by default over here. I am not going into user stories details how you should write a user story, but this is the area where you can actually do it. Now if I talk about configure fields, I will show you this, what exactly is this, and I am just creating one without any descriptions, and you can have the priority labels or any other items that you want to add, if there is any linked issues that we will be talking about, or if if you are creating a task, whether it is a part of epic, that also we can do the original estimate and remaining estimate. If there is some field that you don't want, you can actually uncheck that. You can click on custom and uncheck them. It will show you only the related stories or related field that you want to add. So this is one area where you can actually still work on, but right now what we are trying to do is trying to find out how we can create a story or task to your backlog. So let's create this one, test task creating of plus creating from plus sign. So this is the plus sign I am actually referring. I had clicked here, this pop-up was came, and I am just creating it. And this is a checkbox. If you want to create multiple from this screen, if you check this, the screen will not go out. So I have checked it for now, and I will create. So this is one task I have created. The next one I am creating a epic. So what I am actually creating over here, a test epic for tutorial, and I am just there is two things. One is so let's try to give another name. This is a name, and this is a summary. Why I am just writing it, so that you can identify why epic have name and summary two different field, because it's appear in two different places. This is the summary. So instead of test epic summary, and I can say test epic name. I am creating it now. So it's give you, once you click on create, it gives you what's the ID it was created for your reference. But it's actually the screen was not moved out because I have checked this one. So I am unchecking it and click on cancel to close this one, or you can create another one by without checking it. If you create, that story will create and the screen will disappear. It's very simple. So I am just cancelling it now. and we'll try to find out the new items that we have created, where are those. So I still want to find out that we had created couple of the stories, but I am not able to see them. Okay, so this is something came up over here based on its priority what we have. The last stories we have selected, test task creations from the plus sign. This is the task we had created, but I am not seeing the epic. So this is a very high level of your product backlog, and you can create in multiple ways. A creation of stories can come directly from here or from the plus sign. If you are working on a Scrum project or Scrum board, your epics will not come up, but epics comes always over here. So this is the epic panel. So you can see the test epic name is appearing over here. You can open the epic, and if you click on the epic, it shows all the stories under that epic. There is no stories under this epic at this point of time. I can click on all issues. These are all my epics, and if you select any of the epics, it shows the stories under that epic, and I can give some color for this epic. So for an example, I am giving a red color for this one. So let's take some different color that we don't have used so far. Okay, let's take this color. That's okay, but as of now I don't have anything. So I'll go back, click on all issues. It will be showing me all my issues under the epic, and I'll select all of them. So for an example, I want to assign all those stories under that epic. So if I drag from here and drop into this test epic, it will be moved to that epic. So this is one way you can do a drag and drop. I think I clicked somewhere else and it's got hanged. So now what we are trying to do is, these are the stories that currently I want to mark as a part of this epic. So I can simply select the first one, press the shift key, and then select this one. So all of those stories will be selected, and I can drag and drop into that epic. So these stories will be come into this particular area. Now in both these spaces, it shows the epic name, and over here also it shows the epic name. But if I really wants to edit that epic, I can click on that TC314. This is a summary of the epic. Epic name is where it shows the along with your user story. So if I now click on any of the other epic, it shows these are the stories under the epic. If I click on this one, it shows these are the stories under this epic. If I want to change anything under the epic, I can click on this TC314 directly from here. This is the epic. When you open the epic in one window, you can see all the stories under this. You can create this plus sign. You can click on this plus sign to add any sub items under that story. So this is a third options where you can create user stories under any epic. So far we learned 3 ways of creating user story. Now here I can say, okay, creating a child story of the epic 314. This is the idea I am just giving, and this is your 314. This is the test epic summary, and if I click on create, this is now part of one of the stories. Now what we have created, creating the child, child, so that is something wrong. I am just leaving this spelling. Okay. So if I go back to my backlog, so how do you access your backlog? You can see this is your one of the menu. This is your project, this is your board selections, this is each board will be having a different backlog. We'll talk about how we can have multiple boards in a while. But backlog, I know this is my backlog, this is my epics, and within my epics, this is all the epics that I am talking about, and these are the stories not yet assigned with any of the epics. I can look into all the epics right now we have. Also, you can create a new epic directly from here. So this is called a epic panel. So I have 2 panel, versions panel and epic panel. Version panel we'll talk about later, but try to understand this is my epic panel. Within a epic panel, I have list of all the epics. If I click on any of the epics, it will come up here. and I can actually select any of the epic to see what are the stories or tasks is part of that epic I have selected. Now the second option is, if you want to see how many stories does not have any epics, you can click on issue without epics and you can see all the backlog items for this backlog doesn't have any epic associated. So this is a very high level of your product backlog. Now what we'll be trying to do is we'll try to find out a sprint backlog, how we can create, because as of now I know that couple of the stories I have in my backlog and couple of stories I have in my backlog. Few of them are assigned to stories, epics. Few don't have. Few of them are estimated. Few don't have the estimation. Based on the estimations I have, that I am assuming these are the few stories. Those are ready to start working on. So what I'll be doing is, as a good practice, I'll move them as the top of the backlog by selecting all of them using the Shift key and moving to top of the backlog. Once I have moved it to top of the backlog, those are all coming up. If you see there is something in yellow in color, that is because of this flag. If you flag something, flag is a kind of impediments. I think I have covered that earlier, not covered, then we'll be covering in another video. So now this is my backlog. As of now, I don't have any sprint. So once I have my sprint planning or during my sprint planning, I'll create a sprint by clicking on this button, and this space is now created with the TC sprint 2. Why it is TC? Because the alias of all the user stories over here, the project alias is TC, and based on that TC it's coming up here, but still you can change it by clicking on the edit sprint and you change that sprint name as well. You will be talking about the sprint goal in a while. Now when you are moving the stories to sprint, there is multiple ways you can do that. One way, you can just drag and drop to the sprint. So this is one. It's actually went all of them because I had selected all of them. So I am just moving it back because I wanted to show you something differently in a different way. So I am just moving one. So this is one way you can move to the sprint. The another way is, if you see this particular line, you can drag and drop wherever you want to stop, and you see on the right hand side of the bar that I am moving, it's there is showing the number of issues and the story points that is actually going to top of the sprint. So let's assume I am dropping it here. So now you can see in my sprint backlog I have 5 items. Now your product owner says, okay, there is one more important stories that I think we need to work on. So and they says, okay, this is the story that I want to work on. This is something very high priority came up. So what I will be doing, I will just click on the control for data integrity, and let's assume that we have that acceptance criteria and we have the grooming right now, and we estimated it something, for an example, let's say 8 story points for now, and we are good to plan it. Now from here we wanted to have the story, this is TC 68, as a part of the sprint. So the third way, you can expand this and look for the sprint, and I can select the sprint name, that is TC sprint 2, that is we are targeting for. Once you will do that, you will see that stories automatically move to the sprint. So there are 3 ways I just demonstrated you can move your stories to your sprint. Now the list you have for this particular area under TC sprint is your sprint backlog. You can have multiple stories under your sprint backlog by moving your stories, and you can see I am actually putting a different epic story based on my priority. I am just dragging and dropping it here. Okay, so that way I can actually have multiple stories and I will be moving it in my backlog. So this is my sprint backlog, this is my product backlog. Now as of now, this plan sprint is something different. It needs a confluence where you can create some documents. That's not important now. To work on this, I will be just closing this one and I will be closing this one so that I can have a better visibility. Now let's assume, based on my capacity or my team's capacity, these are the stories we are committing. Now it's time to start the sprint. So once you will start the sprint, how you will be starting the sprint? You need to click on the start sprint. So this is the button. If you have not started your sprint, you need to click it. So once I will click the start sprint, it will show me a pop-up box. Okay, these are the stories that we don't have values for the remaining field. So there is something when you do estimations in Agile, it's very important to you update the remaining estimation. We estimated something that will be covering how we can estimate for user stories and the task level in a different video. But here let's assume that we have the estimations, and this is where you will be selecting your sprint start date and your sprint end date. So if it is a 2-week sprint, I will be ending somewhere at 25th. So duration is a custom. You can select 2 weeks or 3 weeks, or you can select custom also. If I select 2 weeks, by default it will be taking 26th November. If it today is 12th of November. So if I look into my calendar, 12th is starting, 26th is ending. Ideally you can end it on 25th also, so that you will be utilizing based on the time zone of the server. It's taking that time. So it's actually it's starting at 0956 am and ending at 0956. So it's exact 2 weeks. And here is the place where you will be adding the sprint goal. So you add whatever the goal you have, sprint goal 1 and sprint goal 2. So you know what exactly the sprint goal is, and you need to talk about how you are adding your sprint goal. So it's always better to have the sprint goal added here. Now based on your capacity, you have there are 10 working days. There is something more about working days. You can open a new tab to read about. This is a Confluence page where it's talk about how you can set your working days, but we will be learning in this video only when we are talking about configuration of our board. Now I will click on start. Based on that start, whenever I have started, it will take me to the active sprint. So if I go to my backlog, I am going back to my backlog, and I have my sprint backlog and I have my product backlog. In my sprint backlog, I don't have the start sprint, but it says 33 story points are started, 10 story points are in progress, because I have picked few of the stories that was not completed on the previous sprint. That's TC sprint 1, those were in progress. And when we started the sprint, it was by default came to the in progress, and none of them are closed. This is the high level status it shows. This is your sprint goal, and this is a very high level summary that 8 issues are there. Another view of your active sprint is go to the active sprints, and you can select see your configuration of the board. The configuration of new analysis, design, development, testing, review done. This is something coming up based on what we have demonstrated earlier. Because of that example, I have created this particular board, and we'll learn how to configure a board like this based on your workflow states for your user story. So this is your board of your sprint, and where you can actually move your stories at different level, and it shows total 9 days of remaining. It shows when it was started, when it was the projected end date. Ideally there should not be anything called projected end date. Sprint has to be closed on the same date that it's actually planned for. Again, when you are done with all your work, there is options called complete sprint. So let's assume that we have reached to the end of 2 weeks and you are good to go. You will be complete that sprint. So I can actually, let's assume that this is the story that is testing is done, and then I will be moving it to review, and finally let's assume this is done. And so I don't have rights to move it to done, because I have made some changes in our configurations that only product owner can move that changes. That's also one of the important area that we need to understand. And also there are some of the subtasks that we can see. If there are some subtasks, what are their states? So I can see there are 2 subtasks. Under that, we'll look into how the subtask also can move from different state to different state under one story. So we'll learn that when we will be configuring your board. But as a sprint backlog item, this is what we have. This is your block state or impediment state. So now this is your sprint backlog. Once I'll complete this sprint, so if you can able to complete this sprint, so let's try to do one thing. What I'll be doing is I'll be marking these two subtasks as done, because what I believe I have made some configurations that none of the story should be completed until that subtask is open. So I'm just marking this subtask is done. I'll talk about more about that in details, but I'm doing it little quicker because my goal is to talk about something else. Now I am clicking on again this one, and we'll see how many subtasks we still have open. Okay, I am not still able to do that. I am closing this one, and I can see it's still loading, and these are the two subtasks that I have. One is done, another I want to move it to done by just clicking it from here. So first I need to move it to in progress, then I will be move it to finish, and this task is done. Now if I have writes, if I know that all the subtasks are now done, so can I move it? Yes. So this is what I have configured in my Jira, that if any subtask is open, the story should not be moved to done. So now I have moved the stories to done, and it's also there is another customizations you may not able to feel that. So it's asking me a screen. This was one of the testing I was doing. Instead of is groomed, I had to have one screen that should ask whether this meeting the definition of done or not. So I'll say okay, mark it as done, and this is now reached to the done. Let's assume that we have reached to our last day of the sprint. At that time I will be click on completing the sprint. So if I complete the sprint, I can see that it's asking one issue has done, 7 issues were incomplete. So what do you want to do with that incomplete? You want to create a new sprint or move it to them or backlog. So let's move it to the backlog. I'll just click on complete, and the sprint will be closed. It will show you your burn down chart, how your burn down charts happens for the entire sprint, because we are assuming that we reached to the last day of our sprint. Now if I go back to backlog, I'll see there is no new sprint. It asking to create a new sprint. If I click on active sprint, it will show blank because none of the sprint is active. Now if I want to see my previous sprint details, whereas those stories gone that we have completed, because we have completed a couple of the stories, and that stories will no longer be there in the backlog, as we mentioned that only the open stories will be in the backlog. But if you want to see the closed stories, one options apart from going to filter is you can go to reports, and there is one report called sprint report. You can select the sprint report from the list. This is the sprint report. If you click the sprint report, it will show you the list of stories that's got completed under the selected sprint. So it's taking some time because of the server or network issues. Okay, these are the two sprints. So it says okay, these are the completed stories, 5 story pointer. This story we had completed, and these are the stories are not completed as a part of your sprint. And this is your sprint 1, where in the sprint 1 it says okay, these are the stories that we have completed, and these are the stories were not completed. So that's what it shows you, a sprint report when you completed a sprint. So this burn down is a bad burn down based on the different task items or the different board where the estimation statistics you have, whether your burn down is coming on story points or burn down is coming on estimated hours, your charts view or the look and feel will be different. I think I have covered that burn down in a different video. You can refer that. Now let's go back to my project and try to understand the next topic that we'll be talking about. So far we got an idea about the product backlog, the sprint backlog, starting a sprint, closing a sprint, and looking into the sprint backlog. That's what you can do. And similarly, you also have learned how to create a user story, what are different areas you can create user stories, how you can map user stories to Epic, how you can create stories under Epic. So there is multiple areas we have learned. The next topic what we will be learning is configuring our Scrum board, and I think that we'll be learning in a while. Okay, so this is one of the most important area for all configuration, because if we are talking about Jira is the most customizable ALM tool in the industry, in the market, because many people work on Rally or version 1 or many other tool. But Jira is the area where they have multiple level of customization. So there are very deep rooted customizations that we can do at our administration area, but as a Scrum Masters you can do some basic customization. So before we do that, let's try to add some stories in our backlog, and I am just creating one sprint. I am randomly making a sprint backlog as well, because that configuration will definitely impact your sprint backlog and product backlog both. I have my sprint backlog. I'll now start the sprint. So I will be having, I'm just starting it blindly without checking anything, because I just want my board to be there. I'll be moving few stories randomly at different places, and we can actually talk about what exactly these things are. Now I have my backlog, I have my active sprint. I want to do some board configuration, and this is my Scrum board. So in the Scrum board, if you click on this particular board settings, what you can do. So if I click on this board settings, so there are multiple areas from this board areas that you can access from this menu itself. So I can create a new board, I can hide menus. If I click on hide menus, this all menus will be hidden and you will get a little better space. And there is some more areas. Show menus is just a reverse of that, show detail view. So on the right hand side, the issue detail view is your issue detail view. If you select some stories and it shows right hand side a issue detail view, that's what you can actually do from here. Show hide detail view, it will hide that. And if you have a selected stories, if you click on show detail view, it will show you that detail view. So on the right hand side, that's the detail view. And so the version panel, so the epic panels, you can select it from the menus or you can click it directly from here. This is the epic panel, this is the version panel. I don't want to see them right now, but this is where what you can access from over here. And also there are some options called print cards. If you are having a physical board, you can click on the print cards, it will take you this screen where you can print and then later cut them using scissors and put it into your physical board. This is one quick access areas, but if you are into an active sprint, I am just expanding that. If you are in active sprint, the menu options will be little different. So if I click on here, I will be seeing all of them, but few more items like open issues in a sidebar. So as of now, what happened, this is a new view of Jira. If I click on any of the stories, it's open a pop-up, but instead of pop-up, if you prefer it open it in a sidebar, you can click on open a sidebar and you can see the sidebar is coming up right over here, and wherever you will be clicking it, instead of a pop-up, it will be coming up on your right hand side. So there are two options. If you click it now, open issues in a dialog, and if you click on it, it will be come up in a dialog. So this is two ways you can actually move where do you want to show your details. One options you have expand all swim lanes. We'll talk about what exactly swim lanes. If you can see, there are multiple categorizations we have over here, right? These all categorizations are called swim lanes. This is configured. This is right now is the epic name and all the stories coming under epic, and these epics are as right now working as a swim lanes. This particular menu is saying expand all swim lanes. So all the swim lanes will be expanded. You can also have an options called collapse all swim lanes. All the swim lanes will be collapsed. The swim lanes are formed with epics over here. We'll look into that how we can configure them. Now hide epic panel is already, we already have hidden that epic panel. It's not appearing here. So it's only appear on your backlog. If I look into my backlog, if you have open your epic panel, so this is your hide epic panel, it will hide it. So that's the same thing. Now there will be few areas that will be configuring. You may have the rights, or you will be asking your administrator to get the rights, or you can ask your administrator to make the changes, because there are two level of administration. One is a system level administrations where you could create workflows and change all the rules. This is your board configuration. Now at any given point of time, just remember, whoever is created the board is the administrator and owner of that particular board. But if you think you want to make some modifications but you don't have rights, you can create your own board and you will be by default getting your own board rights to make any kind of changes, and you can create any number of boards in Jira. So we'll talk about how we can create new boards. Right from here, so I can create a new board. So before we create a new board, let's have some board settings, and then later we'll try to create a new board. So what I am doing is, I am going back over here. I can select on board settings and it will show me few of the settings area. The first area, there are few sections that we have. We have general, we have the column settings, swim lanes, quick filters, card colors, card layout, estimation, working days, and issue detail view. This is all areas that I have to configure. Why? Because this is administrator is someone else. As an administrator, I can add someone as an administrator, but someone owns the board. It's very important for you to understand that each Scrum board is associated with one filter. So when you create a board, it automatically creates a filter for you. Let's try to understand the general settings, all the options from the beginning. So I have a board name that I know this is my TC board. I can change the board name as an administrator. So for an example, team critical board 1 or team Scrum board. Let's do that. So now the board name is now changed. You can see everywhere it's got impacted. Administration, you can add someone else as administrator. Location. So location is, for an example, this particular board is, you want to have one board visible under different project. So you can select that project, or you can have it in your personal board. So if you want to create something only for you, create on your personal space. If you want to create under some other project where you have rights, you can create under that. So for instance, if I want to create a for an example, one board of project A with some specific filter that I want to show on the part of project B, I just need to change the location. So here if you click, I can see the team Scrum board is appearing under the project, this particular project team legends, because this is what I have location. If I select the location something else, this board will not come as a part of that board. And under team rockstar, I can see the task board and TRS board is coming. These are the other boards it shows, but not under the boards in this is not the space. So I'll go back to team legends. I'll select the board. So I just want to make sure that you understand what exactly the location means. Many times if you copy one board to another board, you still need to make some changes on this locations and this filter. Now what I can tell you, okay, this is the filter for TC board and this is what I have edit filter query. What is the filter I have? This is the filter query, project equal to TC and issue type in standard issue types, order by rank and ASC. So this is what I have customized sometime before, so that I don't want any subtask for this. And this is the board what I am actually looking into. If I look into the this backlog, it's only showing me the user stories, but I don't have any subtask under it. Also at the same time, I had created another board. I'll just show you the filter query. You can, I'll tell you also how you can create your filter queries also. This is team A board, this is work board. Okay, this is under team legends. I have a work board for the same sprint, TC sprint 3. This is another board. I can have multiple boards. In this board, I have all the stories and the subtask only. I am not seeing all these stories without a subtask, but it's only showing the subtask and the parent stories. Let me and if you actually look into the filter of this one, you see this is TC and the issue type in subtask issue type. This is the filter for the workboard that I have. I need to change the spelling. Okay, this is my workboard. In my workboard, I have this filter. So let's see if I actually copy this filter and let's paste it somewhere else. This is my task board, and we'll actually quickly compare how these two different filters are different from each other. Now I'll go back to my previous board, that was my Scrum board. Yeah, it's opening. And the Scrum board is still opening. Let me just quickly refresh. Okay, so Scrum board is already here. So this is my filter for the task board in the notepad. Everything is same, project equal to issue. Only thing is issue type is standard issue type, and over here the issue type is subtask issue types. My task board is only showing the standard subtask issue types. Now what is the difference on the other difference that we have? So if we quickly compare, in the swim lanes, the subtask have a swim lanes of stories, and the Scrum board, where I have only the standard issue types, I have a swim lanes on epic. So if I go back to my board, this is my board where I have this sales supports or purchase are the name of the epics. But if I click on the workboard, let's open it a new tab so that we can compare very easily. Yeah, so over here I have these stories as a swim lanes. So these are the two different. Here I have the sales supports or purchase. These are all the swim lanes. We'll learn how this is actually happening. Now I'll come back to the general state. Now at any given point of time, if you want to change that filter, edit filter query, right? You click on that edit filter query and you will able to change the filter query somewhere in the same screen. It's still loading. So this is the result of the filter and this is the query. If you want to change anything in the filter, you should know how to write a JQL and you can create it. If you don't know how to write a JQL, you can click on switch to basic and select what are the filters you want. Or to filter any data. If you don't see your fields, you can click on more. You can add the filter or add the field for your email. So for an example, you can create a due date and you select the due dates and it will come up on your filter. And once it is done, you will click on save as. It's as of now it's not showing at save because I have not made any change. So if I select something instead of this, I will select this Agile Digest also, and you can see the save is now appeared. For your case, if the save is not coming, that can be of two reasons: that you have not made any changes or you don't have rights to make changes on the filter. So all filters owned by some person, and if you create a board, by default you will be the owner of the person. If you have not created the board, the person who have created the board is the owner of the filter. So let me show you what exactly I am talking about, because each board is based on one filter, and who creates the board, by default a filter gets created for that board, and who is creating the board, the person became the administrator of both that board and the filter. I believe you are getting my point. Now over here, I have created this board and I am by default the administrator of this particular board, and there is a filter associated with it, and the name of the filter is filter for TC board 2. Even I have changed the team Scrum board, but earlier the board name was TC board 2, and this is filter for TC board 2. You can select any other filter that you have saved if you have rights, but if you want to change the filter, so there is two way. You can change the filter, or you can create a separate filter and select the filter over here, right? Or you can select the existing filter and edit it, so that you can get a different sets of data for your board. Now, I am not going into showing you where you can actually set the ownership of the filters, because sometimes that is also required. One person working as a Scrum Master and person suddenly left, now new person comes in, and for that person creating new filters for all the boards maybe become problematic. So, administrator can change the ownership of one person created filter to another person's. Okay, this is data related areas, and also this is something using ranking, how you are doing. So, if you look into your filter, all your filter will be having ending with order by rank ASC if it is a part of your board. By any chance, if you remove it, I will show you what will happen. Okay, I am just opening the backlog in a new window, where we saw that we were able to do a drag and drop. Now, remember, the board is backlog or active sprint is both coming under this board. So, whatever the configuration you have in this particular board, your backlog will be behaving accordingly, your active sprint will be behaving accordingly. Now, if I see, I can actually drag and drop. This drag and drop only possible if you have ranking is using ranking is there, by order by rank is there. If I change it, for an example, edit filter query, I am clicking on edit filter query and I will just remove that order by rank ASC. So, now let us give it little focus here, and what I am doing is I will switch to JQL and I am removing this one order by rank ASC. I am just removing it, and then I will click on hit enter and save. So, once I have saved it, you will, and I will go back to my board setting, you will able to see that order by rank is no longer there. So, I have changed that order by rank in my filter, saved it, and coming back to my board. Over here I can see ranking is disabled as the filter query is not order by rank, right. What you will be facing by doing that is, now in this particular board, if I refresh this board and want to do some drag and drop, it will not allow you, because when you do drag and drop internally it's make changes on some of the ranks, but ranking is disabled. Now, if I want to do a drag and drop, it is giving a error, ranking is disabled as the filter query for this board is not ordered in ascending order. Please check the filter configuration. So, to have that, you need to have your add rank as a part of the filter. Now, I clicked on that button and it is added order by rank. Now, I will be able to move do the drag and drop within board now. Great, right. So, it is now working. Oh, I need to refresh this page, sorry. So, now I am refreshing this page, I have refreshed it and I can actually move it within this particular board. So, this is the basic configurations on the general filter, where you will be working with the ownerships, you will be working with the data, how it is coming up. In most of the time this will be configured by your agile coach or administrator, whoever is working. If you are working as a Scrum Master, you will get a 50-50 chance to configure that, but if you are working as a developer, tester, development team member, I do not think you will be changing this area. Now, we will talk about few of the areas like columns. So, before we come into columns, I will show you something else in my board. So, if I open any of the user stories, let us try to understand there is something called workflows, and each user stories or each work item is associated with one workflow that is defined through administrations. We will be doing some administration video sometime later, but let us try to understand. This is TC29, and if I look into this particular story, there is a workflow associated with it. The story is still loading, So let it load, and then we'll look into what workflow this user story is going through. So if I click over here in this new video, you can see there is an link called view workflow, and if you click on view workflow, it will show you the workflow. And in this workflow, you will able to see, okay, this is a complicated workflow, but let's try to understand how many stops we have. I have a to do stop, I have an analysis stop. This is how it should flow. From analysis, it can go to design, external design, design or development. From development, it will go to testing and review and done. This is a workflow assigned for a user story under this project. Now, when we are creating a board, this is a story, right? This what we are looking into. This is a story. TC29 is a story, but we let's see if is it the same workflow for a task. Now this is a task. From this blue icon, I can see this is a subtask actually, not task. In Jira, task and subtask are two different things. Okay, so this is a subtask, and if I want to see the workflow of a subtask, it's having a different workflow. That I know, but let's have a look. So I have a different workflow: to do, in progress and done. This is for subtask. What I am looking for, I am looking for, and the workflow name is Galaxy subtask. So this is a subtask workflow. We just saw a story workflow. Both are different. So keeping that workflow in mind, we can actually create a different. So if I go back to my presentations that we are talking about, we have a workflow. This is one workflow we have designed for stories, and this is one workflow we have designed for subtask. So there is a benefit of having that. We'll look into that in a while. Now if I go back to my this particular board and let's configure this board. Over here I can see these are the different columns. So whatever the status we had, new, committed, dev in progress, test in progress, review, done, this is all are the different status, because these are coming from the different status. All status are coming up here. I have just created different board. So what I will be doing is, for your understanding, let's start it from scratch. I'll create a new board so that you can understand how the board is getting created. So over here you can create a board directly from this particular 3 dot and click over here, create board. Okay, from this particular menu you can create board from here. So let's create a new board for you, and when you create a new board, it will ask for Scrum board or Kanban board. So if I create a Scrum board, it will ask you 3 questions. Board created with a new software project. That in this case it will create a new project for you, but I don't want a new project. I want to create the board under the existing project. So I'll create board from an existing project. And you want to have a different filter, or you want to have a new filter for this. So I'm saying, okay, let's make it a fresh one under this project. We'll work on that filter later. So I'll click on next, and I'm saying team new Scrum board, and this will be the project, and this is the locations. I can select the location at any place, but when you are creating this, all the options it will ask, and I'll create a board. So the board is taking few seconds to create it for the first time, and from here if I look into this new team, new Scrum team, and if I go into my active sprint, it will be lots of information. Now my goal, I have the stories, I have all the subtasks, then I have stories as the areas. I don't have any swim lanes. This is the time I want to make some changes. So first thing what I want is, I don't want any subtask over here. I just want only user stories, so that I can work as a team and present this to my product owner or stakeholders, because product owner and stakeholders, they might not be having that interest on looking into your subtask level. So the number one, what I'll be doing is, I'll go into board setting and I'll go into general. The first thing, I'll edit the filter query, and in the filter query I'll be just adding only standard issue type should become. And if I look for the standard issue types over here, project equal to TC and issue type in standard issue type, order by SC, enter and save. So my filter is now saved. I'll go back to my board. I'll just click over here. It's loading. So now if I see, the subtask will be gone, only my user stories. If I look into this particular board right now, only stories are there, but I know based on my user stories the workflow is something different. If I look into the workflow for user story, that is something different. If you remember, we talked about the workflow, and the workflow, it shows a different workflow that we actually have. Let's see, to do analysis, external design, development, testing. So what we can do, let's take a quick screenshot of this one, that okay, this is the workflow that currently we are focusing on, right? So these are the workflow. I just take a screenshot. Now what we will be doing is, we'll be configuring the board based on that workflow. So over these configurations, in this configuration, what we'll be doing is, we'll go for columns and refer the workflow what we have. So our columns have to do, in progress and done, and in our workflow that story is following, it's actually having starting with to do, and from this to do, let's have it a little bigger icon maybe. Okay, so this is starting from to do and it's ending at this done. In between, these are the states that I am missing, right, in my board, that I'll be configuring because I'm doing it for the first time. So randomly what I'll be doing is, let's forget about these columns what it is assigned. I'll create the columns first, right? So I'll just click on this add column button and I'll just start changing the name. The first one is analysis. After analysis, I had external design and design. So external design, and I have design. This is my board. Then external design, then development, testing, review. I'm just creating the board, DEVELOP, development, testing and review. This is the board I have configured. Now budgeting is not required for me, so I'll move it to unmap. External design, yes, I can do that over here. Analysis will stay here, in review will go there. These are all the status coming from your workflow. So this is actually the workflow status coming up, because this is budgeting is coming from your Epic workflow. As Epic is also part of a standard issue types, but this in progress is a subtask one, we don't need it. Approved is a Epic type. Design, I know this is for this one. Testing, I'll be move it to here. Development, I'll be move it to here. So now this is very important for you. When you are configuring your board first time, you need to map your columns and workflow status accordingly in a sequence, so that it makes some sense why you are having it. Now let's get back to the board. Once I'll go back to the board, I can see, okay, this board is working perfectly fine. This is what I wanted for, and there is no swim lanes. What we need is a swim lanes in between, so that I can categorize based on the Epic. So if I go into board settings and click on the swim lanes now, and instead of stories, I can select Epics as my swim lanes, and I'll go back to board. Now I can see these are the 4 epics I have, or yes, 4 epics I have, those are created as swim lanes. So swim lanes you can create on multiple areas, you can create on priority, you can create on custom. So let's try to do that. So what I will be doing is, instead of epics, you can select projects. If you are combining multiple projects in one board, so for an example, there is 4 team working together for one program, and you want to have a program board like a scale agile, what they says, you can have one program board filtered by different projects. So over here, if you want to do them by assignee, select the assignee as a swim lanes, back to board, you can see it's assigned by unassigned. So all of them are unassigned. So if I assign some of them to any of the developer, for example, let's assume I'm just assigning randomly to someone, and you see this is how the assignee wise it works. If you want to change by priority, it's all depends how you want to do that. Priorities you don't have, so what you do is you will go with the custom ones. So this custom one you can do it with queries. So you can say high importance, you just want all high importance at one place. So priority in high, highest. This is one I have updated, and I will go with this. I don't want anything else. I have high importance and everything else, and this is my swim lanes that I want. So I can see all of them are high importance are coming up here. So let's try to see if this is another story. For an example, this one story is let's make it as the importance as highest and close it. So you will see that story will move up at the highest area. So this one, let's again move this to highest also. Where is the priority? So I should be having 3 stories. Now we have 3 stories. Now your manager says, or someone advised you, let's have a separate swim lanes for all these stories that you have embedded. So I will be says, okay, IMPEDD, embedded is also a very important area that I want to look for. This is the queries I am adding for customizing my swim lanes. This is something you also can do. Your Scrum Master can do, your Agile coach can do, but if you are watching this video, that means you want to learn, and let's learn that in that way. So to mark the impediments, there is a filter called flag, and if I add it here, now this is worked. So this is flagged equal to impediment. So I can see there are 2 swim lanes, one is impeded, another is high importance. So I know these are the 2 stories, those are high importance, but before that I am looking into the impeded ones, and rest everything is coming up here. So this is all how you want your backlog, how you want your Scrum board to be configured. Now let's try to understand the other areas of your board. This is what swim lanes is. In the columns area, there is one more area that we'll be talking about when we'll be talking about in Kanban configurations. In the columns area, we'll be talking about some constant where we'll be implementing work in progress limit. I'll go into a quick filters. So what exactly the quick filters is? I know what is filter, that we talked about filters last time, but the quick filters are something that is come up over here. So this is your only my issues and recent issues. These are the quick filters I have, but I want at some given point of time that I want some quick filters based on whatever my need is. So for an example, I want a quick filter. Let's assume that I have some let's say PROJECT project S related, or I think let's assume I am just adding some value, steel thread. Okay, so steel thread is a new label it's still th, so you cannot have a space. Okay, just take it this way. So I am just added steel thread for few of the user stories for whatever the purpose. I am just giving an example. You can add quick filters for whatever the reasons you want. You can have quick filters within that. So you can have by person's name. You can have, if for example, if you are working with 3 different product owners and you want to have, let's have 3 different product owners name as a quick filters, you can do that. And what I am doing is I am just adding a steel thread, a different labels, so that we can use that. And once you will go over here, you can go for quick filters and add a quick filter. For an example, the product owner example that I was talking about, for Mr. X, you can give the filter name, and over here you will say reporter, reporter, reporter is equal to any name. So for an example, I am just giving Agile Digest is the reporter, that is the admin. But what I want is another is want to see steel thread and labels in, I am just giving steel thread over here and add. So I just created 2 quick filters, steel thread and Mr. X. What you will be able to look into them, say Mr. X is coming up here and steel thread is coming up here. So there are 2 quick filters. I know this is my board, this is how it works, but I want to see only the owner is Agile Digest. So none of the stories were created by Agile Digest. I'll uncheck that. So let's see if I can make someone as a product owner. So who is the person? Let's say Charles David is the product owner. Okay, so what we'll be doing is let's change this quick filter for instead of Mr. X if it is not working, because Agile Digest have not created any of them. So I'll change someone else as a reporter over here, and let's say, okay, so most of them created by someone else, they are no longer part of Jira. So CH Charles is also not part of the Jira anymore. I can see digital folk. Let's see if that person is still have some stories. No. So what I mean to say, okay, team legends have few stories, but those stories were created by someone who is no longer there. So ultimately, for this particular example, I don't have that persons to create a filter on them. If you are working on, if you wants to make them, primarily what we need to do is change the reporter to someone else. So let's try to do that. If I can do a quick bulk update or quick update for any of the stories to change the reporter. Okay, the reporter is, I think, from the Jira new configurations. They are not allowing me to change the reporter, even these are the administrator. So this is something, it's not allowing me to change any of them. So this is one story that I can see. The reporter is Agile Digest. I'm just moving it to the project so that we can actually have that. So okay, this is there one project also. Let me just move it to the sprint. Okay, so I have moved something to the sprint, and in my active sprint, let's see if that Mr. X now work or not. So what is the filter we had for Mr. X? We'll see Mr. X reporter is equal to, we'll make it as admin, update, and back to board. And if I look into this filter now, Mr. X will be having 1 tickets that is coming up here. Similarly, we had couple of stories where we have added the label as still thread, and this is the quick filter. If I click on this quick filter, you will be able to see these are the 2 stories within your board. So you can actually filter out multiple areas of your permutation combinations where you want to filter them and have your stories over here. Now, based on your workflow, you can see one more area. So, if there is anything in analysis or anything in to do, it can go only to analysis. So, similarly, if this is my board and I have something in to do, I can only move it to analysis. But if anything is analysis, it can go to your external design, it can go to design, it can go to development directly. So, if I look into something in to do, it can go only to analysis, right? This is where I can drop it. You can see that's coming as a green. But if something is already in analysis, you can see that 3 block is getting highlighted. So, that is because of your workflow. How your workflow is designed and your workflow status are mapped with your columns, you can drop it accordingly. So, that's how we have designed in your if you are in external design, you can go directly to development. If you are in design, it can go directly to development, and if you are in development, it can go to testing. So, the first external design and design will go to development. Development can only go to testing. So, if there is something I have over here, it can go to development only, but if there is anything in development, it can go to testing. So, this is how we have planned for. Now, we talked about the quick filters. This is, I believe you understand how you can work on quick filters. Let us talk about the other areas that we have. The card colors. The card color is something again very easy. For an example, if you want to highlight the card colors based on the priorities, right. So, these are the different colors it will come up: highest, high, low, medium, lowest, and it will also show on your backlog as well. So, this is, you can see all the cards have a different colors at the left hand side, and if you look into your product backlog also, because it is part of the same board, you will be able to see the similar kind of color coding over here. But what you wanted is you don't want it to have this color like this, but if you you just want to show a color with particular your reason or your particular criteria. Instead of having the steel thread, for an example, I am just giving you an example of that steel thread. Instead of doing priorities or assignees, I can just go with the queries, and I can say, okay, show me all in green if the labels is in steel thread, right. So, if that is there, only it will show me. I can add multiple criteria with different colors, but this is what I am actually doing for this one example. So, I can see this is coming up as green because it is a steel thread one, and there will be one more. This one is coming as green because this is a green one. If I go into my backlog, and I will able to see the same color coding over there. So, this is something you can actually make changes or identify very easily within a big list. Okay, this is the steel thread, this is the steel thread because this is a green color. So, any kind of changes you can actually do it in your backlog, so that you can customize it based on your need. You may not need this feature, but if you need, this is how you can do it. Card layout. And this is also one important area that as of now, what is card? You know, based on 3C, card, conversation and confirmation. Card is the area where you have the summary, and in this card it is showing you few areas like what is the estimations, what is your whether it is priorities you have or flagged, or what is the type. But this card information is not sufficient enough for me. I need few more information, and for an example, I want board in the board settings, I want for a backlog, I want to see the labels. So, if what it says, if the story is in backlog, a label additional, you can add any 3 extra field, not more than that, in card in backlog or active sprint. So, if I have added this, and if I look into my backlog, you can see that label is coming. this groomed, and this is steel thread, and this is also steel thread team, whatever the label you have, it's also coming. So you can add any 3 field for your card, but if I want it to for a Scrum board, for an example, I want to have assignee's name in my Scrum board and back to board. So if I look into this, this says unassigned, 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 everywhere it is coming. Look, fair enough. Once it will be assigned, I will get to know, or it will give me an idea this stories has not assigned. Maybe the team is working on a subtask level and the stories are not assigned to individuals, but the subtask may be getting assigned to the individuals. We can actually look into a subtask level as well. Now I will go for a board setting and I will add one more field, and this will be the sum of remaining estimate and sum of original estimate. For an example, these are the 2 fields I will like to add. So sum of remaining estimate, add, and I do not want that chart date of first response, I do not need it, and I want original estimate. So why the summation sign is, the summation signs actually shows the calculations from the subtask combinedly. It calculates if it has 3 subtasks and all the subtasks have 3 hours estimations, at the story level it will show 9 by using the summation sign. So if I go back to my board now, I can able to see that none of the stories or tasks are estimated yet. So this is one task that have 4 hours estimated and 4 hours remaining. That way 4 hours and 4 hours, it's not assigned to anyone, but you can add some values informations to your card. So this is the card layout, and there is one more options you can add, that's days in columns. So if you enable these days in columns, it actually shows primarily good for your Kanban board, where you actually calculate your cycle time or lead times, that you can visualize how many times that cards are in the in that particular one column. So I can see this is for in to do state for 95 days, this is in to do state for 95 days. So all of them are to do state in 95 days. This is in testing state for again 87 days. So this is for Kanban board. It is very important to visualize that. In the Scrum board normally we do not enable that, because I know we have 15 days of time and within that time we will be working on them. So now what we will be talking about some of the estimations on this board, what they will be working on. So based on these board settings I can work on the estimations. So estimations, there are 2 areas in these sections. If you click on the estimation statistics, I know the story points. There are multiple areas you can select as your statistics of your estimations, but what I am doing is I am using your story point as your estimation statistics. So if I do a story points, if I look into my backlog, let's have a quick look in the backlog. On your right hand side of your backlog, a number is coming up and it's not yet. So this is the story points, on the right hand side it's coming up because my estimation statistics is story points. And in my Scrum board, if I go back to my board and look into my Scrum board, at the end of every story card I will be able to see some numbers at the bottom right corner. So this is numbers, whether we have a story point estimated or not estimated, we need to look into that. This is your all the stories are saying unestimated. This is team legends, and this is these are the stories are not estimated. And if I go into my backlog, I need to just have an estimation statistics for setup for this particular team. So if I look into this board setting over here, I don't know, I just clicked on refreshed. So what I will be doing is, this is estimation story points. I will just do a original time estimate instead of story points, and this is what I have updated. Let's see how the backlog is showing. In the backlog on the right hand side, I had the story points. Let's refresh, because I have changed the estimation statistics. It's actually come from there. So it's still showing here. I don't see that has estimated original time estimate or maximum issue count. Am I doing it for the same project? New team Scrum board. This is okay. So this is a different board I am actually working for. I'll be selecting a new team Scrum board because I am configuring it for the new team Scrum board. And you can see this estimation statistics has gone because I don't have that. And if I switch back to story point, if I switch back to story points now and look into this particular backlog, I'll be able to see that story points will be appearing now because I have the story point estimation as my estimation statistics and my stories have the story points estimated. So keeping that in mind, I think Jira suddenly started going little slow, but this is what I have. And in the same way, this is if I go back to different board for the active sprint. So my new team Scrum board, this is the Scrum board that we have configured. We can see this 5 is coming up, but this is coming up because our estimation statistics is story points. If I change it to something else, for an example, original time estimate, and the estimation configuration has been saved. When you change the configurations of estimations, it takes some time to process, and the same thing you will be able to see once you will refresh it. This is gone. So this is how your estimation statistics is actually working based on whatever you are looking for. The second step, whether you want to enable time tracking or not. So I'll go back to this one as story point, and I always do the track time against issues using Jira remaining estimate and time spent. So by default, if you have a track of log hours, so if I go back to my board, so for an example, right now I don't have that, and I am on my active sprint. I clicked on this and I want to log some hours for this one. So this is my view. I have clicked on these 3 dots over here, and I have a log work, but it's not calculate based on your this is your time tracking. This is a new Scrum board, but it's not the way that default time tracking is enabled. It's, I think, the new view, it's by default enabled. Let me quickly change that and see how the difference is coming up. So time spent and remaining time, I don't have an estimate over here, so I have spent 3 hours and remaining is 5 hours. This is what I am actually updating, but it will work better. Okay, I will be refreshing it. In the board settings, what I will be doing is remaining estimate and time spent. So if you have these options, what will happen is there will be 2 options that I have actually enabled that from the backend. Irrespective of that, it will be showing when you create it original estimate and remaining estimate for as I have added those time tracking field as a part of the screen, so that you can do it. But instead, in case you don't have, you need to enable this over here. I'll show you which 2 fields I am actually talking about. And now ideally, if you don't see the log work, you will able to enable that, and then this log work will come, and this is how it will be appeared. I have enabled it from the backend. Now what I was talking about is, if you want to create some new stories under that particular board, and this configure field, there is an option called time tracking that will get enabled for original estimate and remaining estimate. This will be appear once you have either enable it from here or from the backend. That was our estimation statistics. Now one more is, important areas of estimation statistics is when you are working on your burn down chart. So let's try to look into our burn down chart for team new Scrum board. If you go for a burn down chart reports, so all reports, backlogs or active sprint, everything comes under one board, and within this board, these are the reports coming from. Now burn down chart is right now showing on remaining time estimate, right? And you can still do for original estimate also, but this remaining time estimate will enable only if you have, where is that board configuration window gone? Okay, let's configure this board once again from here, and the estimation statistics I am making it time tracking is none, and this is story points back to board. Now once I have done that, let's see if it has made any changes for the team new Scrum board in your burn down. So I'll just refresh this page so that it will show me whether the remaining time estimate matrix is coming for your burn down or not. Okay, now it's showing on your story point, but remaining estimate is not here in your burn down, because that's also was enabled because of that particular settings that we have done. So if you are working on logging your hours and marking your story subtask estimated with some hours, and then changing it with different changing it every day by logging your hours, your burn down you wants to plot with effort hour instead of story points, you can use that. Now if I enable this, our burn down will be start appearing over here. Now again, when we are talking about the burn down, if I refresh it now, you will able to see this is how your burn down is appearing, and you can select whether story points or the remaining estimate. It will take by default on that settings. You can change it to story points if you want. So remaining time estimate. In your burn down, you can see these are the gray areas, those are actually marked as weekends in your current sprint. That also you can change based on if your country's weekend or if any other holidays that you have. So we'll mark that 21 as our holiday, and we'll see whether it is coming up or not. So in our sprint there is an option called working days, and in our working days I'll say okay, I add one day as 21st of November is my holiday, and I'll be coming back in my burn down. I'll see another bar at 21 will be come up, and this is where you, if you look into a real burn down, your ideal line will always go flat or straight on those burn down. So that if I go into switch into a story points over here, you can see it's burning down every day. Whenever it is weekend or holiday, it's going straight, but that means the system is not expecting any burn down on those days. So this is how you are configuring how many holidays or leaves you have on your sprint durations. So that is what area, that one area you can do in over here. The issue detail view is something that we already talked about, that okay, this is what we have in our issue detail view. When you click on any of these, for an example in backlog, if I click on any of the stories on the right hand side, it shows the issue detail view, and that is what in the configuration sections we are talking about. So in this is our issue detail view, and you can configure these sections right from here, that what you want to see in issue detail view. So if you click on issue detail view, these are the general fields like acceptance criteria, status, priority, labels, epics. This is what you have, and where you can able to see that these are the different fields it's appearing at different section. If I go into over here, so I can see this is the status, this is the description, and this is the acceptance criteria. If you want to add few more field, you can add it here. If you want to drag it somewhere else, the status, you can do that. You can change the sequence, you can add some other fields over here as well. So there are many dates you have, so I can actually add them over here in the date sections. There are a few people who is the reporter, who is the assignee. There are few links area, that subtasks or the related issues that we have over here. So this is the area where you can actually configure your issue detail view. And what I have done is I have changed the status positions to somewhere down where it was coming earlier. So in the issue detail view, it will be coming somewhere over here, the status, and we added some start date also, right? Assign, this is the people section, this is where are the date sections we had, few more sections, original where is the dates, states.
Okay, so this I think is the area where Jira is actually constantly changing this issue detail view, and they are actually moving into a different view. That issue detail view is no longer that effective as of now, but if I want to add something, this is on the right, this is a create subtask. It's not actually showing the date sections, that when it was started this is created and this is updated options I have. You can configure that issues layout somewhere here, because Jira is also coming up with new gen kind of projects, and within that this new issue detail view is actually can be configured from this particular area where you have these configuration sections and you have a rights. You can actually change it from here. So in the summary description, this is how it's actually coming up, and you can actually drag and drop right over here. So you can add a field, you can add some description. So so this is a description field and there is no hidden fields. Everything whatever is possibly can be moved here, you can do it. And if you want to move something, you can actually hide that. Again, it's possible only you are working on a new gen project. So this is something I can drag and drop or remove, and this once you will move your pointer. Summary you cannot move, descriptions you can move below acceptance criteria. Status is the context field, you want assignee first. Okay, assignee you cannot be move above status, the status will be top, but I want the label above assignee. The first one over here I have a story point, original estimate, and this is all we have. There is no other fields. This is actually based on the new field structure or new visibilities or new screen structures Jira is making. Your configuration settings of issue detail view is not that effective. Now what we have done, if I refresh this, the issue detail view will be changed based on whatever we have configured on that particular screen. So it's loading. Once it will be loaded, we'll see that assignee was coming above the other status. It's still loaded. Jira sometimes works little slow because of the load. Acceptance criteria, we move it before descriptions, it's coming there, and in the labels we moved it to top, so that's where assignees and reporter above it is coming. So this is how you can configure that sections from here. It's not getting configured from your board settings like issue detail view. So this is a very high level of how you can configure your board. The one simple ways we can actually still do is creating another board or the task board. So what we instead of creating, I'll just show you what configurations we have done for the task board. So this is a workboard I am saying. In this workboard I have actually done a task related item. So I have filtered only the subtasks should be there along with the stories, and this is what configurations I have done. So you can have card layout, and I have added assignees and remaining work that actually showing me which subtask is assigned to whom. So this is, I can see this person, it was assigned to this person, and this is something it's remaining, and I know how many stories we have subtask for. And you can configure your task board for your team. If I look into the columns, I know I have only 3 columns, but when I created it was actually bought all these status in progress. So I'll just remove everything. I don't need all of them. I don't need development, because I know the subtask work on only this state and this is also not required. So this is to do, in progress, and done are the 3 states. And if I go back to backlog, I'll see perfectly my board is working fine, because all the subtask works on certain workflows, and this particular board of the subtask is created accordingly. So once you watch this video, you will start practicing it in your Jira. You can have your own Jira cloud or in Jira server instance, practice it, watch this video multiple times if you got stuck, and I think you will be able to do all the configuration. One little areas that I want to talk about is if you are working on Kanban, what are the other settings you may want to do. So when we talk about Kanban, there are 3 sections we'll be talking about: the Kanban board, a class of service, and a work in progress limit. So what I'll be doing is I'll create one Kanban board for your understanding. So I'll create a board, and that time I'll be create a Kanban board and board from an existing project. I'll click on next and Kanban, or let's assume rapid action team. I'm just creating a separate team under the same project, and they will be working on all rapid action teams or ad hoc request that needs to be resolved immediately. For those I have a Kanban board. In this Kanban board, by default I don't have a backlog. Now you see, all the stories, everything is coming in the board, because Kanban, that is what Kanban for, because we need to work on them. Based on whatever the board configurations and workflows you make for those particular stories, you can do that. But if you really want everything in the board, or you want as a something as a backlog, if you want a backlog, there is a separate setting for this board. If you go into board setting, and if you see in the board setting, we have one more section over here, and it says, do you want to have something in the in this Kanban board? So just observe this area now. I am just moving this to do to backlog. Once I have done this, the Kanban backlog is now appearing. Now I can have something configured on my column sections right over here. You can create multiple columns, map your status, and you will be done with that. Now I can see in my board. So for an example, this is in progress and done. My Kanban board is very simple. You can have multiple columns based on your need, but I have a backlog, and whatever I have in a backlog, you can move it to, these are all in progress based on because this is having the same sprint scope and Kanban scope, but you can segregate the filter Kanban board for specific projects by having some custom field value or labels or whatever you want. The important thing, you can see that now the epics in a Kanban boards are appearing as a part of backlog. This was not coming in your Scrum project because epics were coming in your epic panel. Now there is a settings also, you can move it the same way. In Kanban only you can do that. So this is a epic panel, you can only change it in Kanban project, you cannot change it in a Scrum project. So if it is a Kanban project, I have changed this epic panel, and within that epic panel, once you have done that, you will see that epic panel is coming over here, not as a part of backlog. So that customization you can do in your Kanban project. Now instead of sprint, Kanban always shows the second column of your board or columns. So the second columns, what we have, the first column is Kanban. To do is not treated as a column because there is nothing mapped with to do, right? Because from to do it can goes to in progress only. So I can actually have analysis, for an example, as the first column and back to board. Now I can see in my backlog I have only to do. From backlog I can move it to do, and in my Kanban board I have to do, in progress and done. Why it is saying to do? Earlier it was showing in progress, now it is showing to do because the analysis column is mapped with to do, and the next to start on Kanban you first move it to do. Once you move it to do, this to do is the first column of your Kanban board. So this is your Kanban board, right? So this is how you will be configuring your Kanban board. In Kanban board, these 3 dots by default appear. So these 4 dots, it actually shows how many days you are in that particular column. So this is that was when we were actually configuring our card layouts. I think over card layouts, this is days in column, and in the days in columns, if you disable it, it will not come up on the Kanban board. But it's in Kanban, you, as you don't have a time box, you need to have this as a tracker to see that you are not spending or none of the stories got stuck in some of the place. In the Kanban board, one important area that also you need to understand is work in progress limit. So work in progress limit you need to add for each and every columns, and that you can actually add in your columns, and columns constraint is issue count, where you can see minimum and maximum is the area. So I can say okay, maximum 4, this is maximum 2, and this is maximum I don't want to have any limit for this one because this is done state. And if I go back to backlog, I can see that this is having max 4 and this is having max 2, and that's way it is red, because it's any time if your total number of cards is more than the max allowed, it will turn as red. So let's make it as 5 for now. The max limit for this one, I am just making it to 5 and back to board. Now once I have done this, back I will be seeing okay, max 5, I have 6, I'll just move one of them to done, right? So I'll just move something to done over here, and I can see the red color is gone. So that means it's actually showing the limit. If it's not stopping you, but it will alarming you that you are going beyond your limit. And work in progress limit, if you already have worked on Kanban, why it is important, I am not going into that, but I believe you understand why the work in progress limit is. Another important area is called class of services. The same swim lanes that we are talking about can be taken as class of services. Now, to work on Jira by implementing class of services completely, you can actually have the expedite lanes as a class of services, one class of services, but there are two other class of services we have in Kanban. One is intangible and another is time bound. So you can actually create custom field as class of services and assign the values for each and every user story if you are working on Kanban, and make your swim lanes accordingly to that field and have your Kanban board ready accordingly. I think that will be all that we had targeted for today. Let's quickly jump into our this particular board. We already started the sprint, so we defined the sprint, we have identified the sprint goal. Then in the board we actually have there are three kind of board: next gen board, Scrum board and Kanban board. We talked about Scrum board and Kanban board, we configured them. Next gen board will be covering in some other videos. Now in the board configuration, what we have done, we have talked about general settings, columns, swim lanes, quick filters, card layouts, card layouts, I think I repeated it 2 times, estimations, working days, and issue detail view. When we configured our Kanban board, we worked on work in progress limit, class of services, and backlog. So that's all what we had targeted for today. Hope you got some information that we are looking for. If you have any other questions, any doubts, feel free to make a comment here, write a mail to me, or any way that you can connect me. It's okay for me. There is a phone number here for WhatsApp. There is a email where you can drop me an email, and we'll connect together to fulfill your any need that we can do possible. Thank you everyone. Thanks for connecting. We'll see you in the